Welcome to the Business Growth Masterclass, where business growth is made simple. I'm your host, Albert Gillispie.
And I'm your co-host, Kellen Ketchersid. Join us as we bring you stories from business leaders so you can learn from their wins, their losses, and everything in between.
In today's episode, we wanted to address something that I feel like business owners, entrepreneurs avoid talking about, avoid acknowledging that it's there, and that's burnout.
Yeah.
We're a do-it-yourself, get the job done. Doesn't matter what's happening. You're bleeding, you're crying, you're whatever. Just get the job done. And I think if you do that without taking care of yourself, it can lead to some pretty bad roads. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it happens without you realizing it, right? You, especially for people who are listening to this podcast, are probably, typically somebody who's in their early career and really grinding hard. And in those early years, a lot of what your value is tied to your outputs and how much you're producing and doing. And as a person who gets into that mindset of like to-do lists and productivity and efficiency, it can start to crowd out the things that renew you in your life. And before you know it, you might be having health problems or leaning on, some unhealthy habits. And so this is a good episode. I think that we both agreed it would be a good time to just talk to the listeners about some strategies to use to get out of burnout or to prevent it in the first place, and also identify when you might be heading in the wrong direction so that you're self-aware and seeing it before it becomes a crisis.
I think that's a good place to start. Is how do you recognize that you are showing symptoms of burnout, or how do you know that you are in it?
Well, for me, I think it's different for everybody. For me, I actually have physical symptoms of stress at times. I mean, I know everybody has this manifests differently. For me, I actually have trouble sleeping at night. I'll be just thinking over and over again about the next day's workload and what I need to get done. Those are signs. I even end up with like some neuropathy in an arm on my left side. I don't know. That's weird, but it's just truthful. I think people who work hard have tells that they start to key in on as they, in my early 20s, I remember when that started, I was like, what's happening? I went to the doctor and we got a lot of things checked, and it ended up just being stress. I usually can catch things before they get to that point. But if we're not just talking about those sorts of tells, I think if I'm just checking in with myself in my mood, the way I'm presenting myself to other people. A lot of times when I'm showing up to work or to my family, especially irritably or having a short temper or just being too focused on get things done and kind of steamrolling over people, that's a good sign that I'm not in a healthy place. And I'm definitely starting to get close to that burnout. So what's it look like for you?
Well, because it means so many different things, can you succinctly define what is burnout? What are we talking about? Is where my head was going in that.
Yeah, I guess it's when you've reached that threshold where you're not showing up as the best version of you to work or personal life. I mean, that's my off the cuff definition.
I like that. Yeah. When you, whether it's stress or whatever, outward cause is so great that you are no longer capable of showing up as your best self.
Yeah.
That's great. That's like a good differentiator for me. It's some of the same things, a lot of, feeling like high blood pressure or like chest tightness or just like feeling like my heart's racing. And that causes me to sleep poorly, to wake up in the middle of the night, thoughts racing. No matter how unreasonable they are, in my normal faculties, the next day I'm like, that was stupid. Why did I stay awake for 3 hours fretting over whatever? That's pretty telling for me. I'll lose weight.
That's nice.
It's kind of.
I go the opposite way.
Yeah, I'll just kind of running on empty.
Yeah,
is just how I feel. I just I'm tired. I have brain, kind of foggy brain and a lot of those things.
A funny one I just thought of for me, I have popcorn at night. I know that's so weird, but like
I love popcorn.
I do too. And right before bed, if I'm like eating popcorn at bedtime, it's like, oh, I'm in that place. I'm compensating a little bit. Like, I don't know why. I think it gives you a blood sugar spike.
Okay. What kind of popcorn are you eating? Are you like caramel
I do it
popcorn?
old school. No, I like pop it on the stove, old school. Because I listened to a podcast that was talking about phthalates being in the bag, in the lining. I was like, I don't want that. So I do it like grandma on the stove with like olive oil. But it's fine every once in a while. But if I find myself like on a regular basis feeling like I need to pop some popcorn at night, it's such a dumb tell, but it's like eating my feelings, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of, I guess the next step is like recognizing that.
Yeah.
For me, it's my vices. It's what am I, maybe my Friday night I'm grilling and I have a drink.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's once a month or once every other week. But in a season, if I catch myself wanting that, or, maybe instead of once a week, it turns into 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah. For me, like recognizing my vices and what I'm leaning on and why, is it a true, what neural pathway am I fueling by eating Skittles, or, am I just bored, or am I, searching for some kind of dopamine hit or whatever. But for me, paying attention to my vices is a telltale of what my mental health and what my physical health is doing.
Yeah. I think alcohol is something that a lot of people go to when they are feeling that, because it kind of numbs. And I have a friend that I grew up with who passed away 2 years ago. He was drinking. I think he was just in a really high stress job, and I think it just grew and grew on him. But I think that's a thing that during COVID really has exploded. I've read articles and research saying that really took off during the lockdown. And so, but I think when people are feeling work stress and burnout, that's a big one. But really just knowing what your particular thing is. And like you said, your vices, or and it might look silly to other people, like eating popcorn.
Yes.
But for you, that might be a sign that you're not your best self. And being able to say, okay, and be honest with yourself, this is not a good sign from me. I need to start thinking about where I'm at and what I can do about it. So
what would you say causes burnout?
I think it's different for everyone. In the context of what we're talking about, overwork can be a big one. Another one can be, and this goes along with it, saying yes to too many things. I think that's a problem a lot of people run into, especially people who are people pleasers or recovering from growing up as a people pleaser. And you end up stretched too thin and, just not really prioritizing things that matter more to you in your life. You start doing the urgent instead of the important. And so I think that's What about you? What would your answer be to that? What causes burnout?
Yeah, I think there's several things. A lot of what you mentioned was running on that red line too long, running without having any margin for recovery. I think that can lead to that. I think toiling and laboring without reaping any kind of reward, meaning, working hard and not seeing the result, not getting the win, doing that too long, I think can result in feeling burnout. I think, especially in economic cycles like what we're in today, where, a lot of people haven't had big, meaningful wins in, 2-3 years. And I think that can lead to that. That can lead to burnout. There's another, I think, worry. I think a lot of this just, at the heart is worry, and worrying about things that you can't control. At the end of the day, there's only a handful of things that you can control: your attitude, your effort, showing up on time, doing what you say you're going to do. There's only so many things that you can control. And when you start to obsess and worry about things outside of that, you're going to feel stress.
Yeah.
And if you continue to just spiral and make things, talking about the waking up in the middle of the night and having these irrational thoughts of the worst case, worst interpretation of little obscure events in your life, that's out of your control. And that's worry. And as Christians, you can either trust God or you can worry. You can't do both.
Yeah.
And so that a lot of times that is pretty telling for me, especially like, what master am I serving? And yeah, I think worry and then just toiling without any kind of positive result can lead to burnout.
I can think of a recent example. The missions organization that I work with, one of the people who's there is just overwhelmed right now. And we're working, and it's understandable. There's a lot going on in this season, but we're working through, the list of things that need to get done, and it's comprehensive. So if we do, if everything gets done, everything should go to plan. But I was asking this person, what specifically are you worrying about? And her answer was, I don't know. It's just like all of it, and that generalized kind of worry, it can just weigh on us and create this weight that we carry around, and it makes us not show up the way we would otherwise. And so much of what we worry about doesn't even come true. So we're wasting our time on things that may not even really come to fruition. So it's a pointless exercise. And like you said, as a Christian, it's a demonstration that maybe my trust isn't where it needs to be. I know that's easier said than done, but there's a point where we have to just kind of let it go. And so that, I guess, is a good segue. If we're talking about, we've said what it is and what causes burnout. So what are we going to do about it? What are some strategies that help you when you're recognizing in yourself some bad things, or, maybe you're heading in the wrong direction? What do you do?
Yeah. I want to first say, to the entrepreneur that's listening to this, that is like the get stuff done, that is like bound and determined, I'm going to get the result. A lot of what we're talking about, like, this isn't an excuse to abdicate responsibility or not try hard enough or not see something through to the end. But this is more of like long-term sustainability of your business. And
yeah, so it's not like you get to check out. I'm overwhelmed, so I'm just not going to show up.
Exactly.
That's not what we're talking about.
Exactly. That's not at all what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so what are some strategies that I take is, I mentioned being aware of my vices. And so I try to control those vices. And what I mean by that is for me, at least for the last probably decade, my vice is exercise. Is when things are stressful, if I don't do something physical almost daily, like I feel like tension. I feel I don't know, just silly stress. And so just kind of having vices that are potentially healthy is something I try to keep in my life. I will also, in that same vein, I try to manufacture wins. If there's only so much you can control winning in business and getting that end result, there's only so much you can control. But if I can manufacture something small, if it is, hey, I told myself I was going to go to the gym 5 days this week and I do that, okay, there's a win. If I plan, at the end of every day, I plan the 3 important tasks that I'm going to do the next day. And then when I do that, okay, that was a win. I did what I said I was going to do. I moved, I controlled what I could control, and I moved the business further along today. And so those are 2 that kind of daily I'm doing to be proactive and address that. And sometimes it's taking a break to recharge.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, for year, and a lot of it was just a season of financial circumstances that I couldn't go on just a Albert trip. But it's something in the last, 4 or 5 years that we've made a priority in my marriage is me going on a solo trip somewhere, seeking, doing something hard, doing something adventurous is kind of fulfilling for me. And so that's another action that my wife and I have made a priority, especially after a hard season, is like, all right, go recharge for a little bit.
Yeah.
We need the best you.
That is a cool idea. I want to hear about this. But while you were talking and specifically about working out, because I'm the same way. If I don't work out regularly, I start to feel off, and I'm crankier, and I'm not as clear in my thinking. And actually, I was reading about this. So a lot of people don't know that when you work out, you are actually, it affects your nervous system. Especially your vagus nerve is affected by your working out. And that actually calms down a lot of the systems in our whole body if we're constantly getting that vagus nerve stimulation. It helps with a lot of other areas. I learned about this because of what I was talking about earlier with that weird stuff I get on my left side of my body, my arm, and even in my face whenever I'm really stressed out. And I found that when I work out, I don't get those symptoms. But it's not just that. It's also, I think it's linked to the brain and everything else. So, Exercise is Medicine, I think, is a book that I think it's Mark Hyman wrote that book, a good guru who's out there. But yeah, it's true. Like when we work out, our bodies change, and even our minds are affected by our health in that area. And just getting out and moving and doing something physical in the real world and not staring at a screen. There's so much just for everything in your psyche. I think the research shows that doing it in the first part of the day, like first thing in the morning, is best. This is where I violate the rules. For me personally, it's best to do, I have found that I'm better if I do it right at the end of my workday, because that's when my energy level is about to either go one direction or the other. I'm about to crash when I get home, or I'm going to rebound based on whether or not I work out. And when I get home, my kids know whether dad worked out they can tell the difference. First of all, I'm walking in sweaty, but also just how I am for the rest of the evening. Anyway, I think that's just so important that people make that a priority. And also I think it's helpful to go to a place where you're not having, unless you enjoy it, not having to think about what the workout has to be, because that takes a lot of mental energy, right? And maybe you don't have the bandwidth for it. I go to a place called F45, but there's so many different options out there, whether it's CrossFit or Orange Theory or just your local gym where they have some classes. But I used to not be a class guy, I'm just going to go into the gym and do my weights. And, I'm going to think about what exercises that day ahead of time. But that actually takes a lot of planning. And that's just one more thing that can get in the way of you actually doing it. Mm-hmm. So I love showing up at F45. I know I'm going to have a great workout. The hardest part is just getting there, and then it's going to be done. And there's a group of people there. So there's also a social pressure to bring the best I've got to that workout. And it works for me. So what that could be for other people is different, but I think it's important that listeners are being deliberate in that choice and getting time for rest and to recover and do some things that help them to step out of the day-to-day productivity to-do list mindset, like a vacation. So
yes.
So I want to hear about this.
That's another great one.
Yeah. So tell us more about your vacation and kind of like, I guess, tell us about what you just recently did, but then can you maybe take out of it, what are the key takeaways that you think other people could try to implement?
Absolutely. So I would say this is separate from a vacation. Like a vacation to me, like with my family, is a lot of recharging and like filling the love tanks of my family. And that's another tactic that we have to be proactive and we have to schedule those. It's important, as silly as it feels, that's such an important thing. And it doesn't have to be some extravagant go to Disney World and spend 20 grand. Like it can be a weekend staycation and you're just really intentional, like about unplugging and spending time with your family. For me, the adventure trips that I was talking about are there's that, and maybe you can relate to this, but there's a piece of, I think, men that need to be in nature, that need to be scared a little bit, that need
adventure. Yeah.
That need to feel that there's an itch there that maybe you don't recognize, but when it's scratched, you're like, oh boy, that was life-giving. Yeah. And so for me, most recent trip I just got back from Sunday night was, I went to Argentina for 8 days for a hunt. And I've gone to Argentina. I went a couple of years ago with some friends who have a ranch down there, and for those who don't know about hunting in Argentina,
which is most people, I would think,
they have a insane population of dove, pigeon, and parakeet. And so it's a different breed of pigeon. It's not like the carrier pigeon in New York City. It's a different one that you would actually eat. But they breed 3 times a year. And so the bird populations are insane. And it's a big agricultural country. And so if you have this essentially invasive species that is running over these crops that are in your main economy, they want to get rid of them. And so when you go down there, you will harvest a crazy amount of animals, a lot more than what we have here, just because the populations are so,
big.
And so I went on I was there 8 days, 6 days of hunting, 3 different locations in different regions of Argentina. The first, we were at duck hunting, which prior to this trip, I had never gone duck hunting.
Yeah, I've never been duck hunting.
And it was fabulous. And so for each of these places, you're going to a hunting lodge, and there's a group there to serve you. There's a cook, there's someone who's kind of entertaining you and making sure you're taken care of. And then there's a group of guides that are taking you hunting and showing you this tailored experience. And so it's, every detail is planned. I really have thought a ton about, and we talked a ton about the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, because it's very much that. They're just trying to be hospitable in every way imaginable. And so the duck hunt was wild. The scenery, right when I landed, they had gotten 10 inches of rain. And so even getting to the location was an adventure. It was a lot of dirt roads, a lot of 4-wheel drive, a lot of spinning out. It was exciting. The actual hunting was phenomenal. There's so many different species, from rosy bill and cinnamon teal, which we don't really have in North America.
Yeah.
And the people you're hunting with are, it's not, they're around my age and just had great stories. And we had a lot of shared interests. And so much of this, what I like about these adventures are the people you get to meet, the stories they share, the commonalities you find, the things you learn about other cultures. And then you're experiencing something outdoors and might be a little dangerous. And so the duck hunting was wild. I think the most exciting morning, it was just a lot of animals. I think we shot 84 birds in one morning.
Wow. That's crazy.
And that was fun. The next couple of days, we kept going west from Buenos Aires. And that was more the traditional dove, pigeon, parakeet hunt. And that was fabulous. The place that we stayed was built in like 1907, and they had renovated it and kept a lot of old, the old cool parts of this building. And the people we were with were like, they learned about, the business coaching aspect. And so we just talked for 2 days about how to improve their business and how, they could show unreasonable hospitality. And so that was a really fun and life-giving conversation. And they spoke pretty good English. One of them that we started talking about politics and, the history of politics in Argentina and what Milei, the new president, what that really means for them in their region of Argentina and how they've experienced all the different things. And so a lot of that in the late 1800s, the US and Argentina were like the up and coming powerhouses. And so there's a huge Italian population in Argentina. They have really good Italian food.
Yeah. I knew their Spanish sounded more Italian, anyway.
And they all look very European. Mm-hmm. But in the late 1800s, Italian families would send one sibling to the US and the other sibling to Argentina.
Hedging their bets.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of the German Nazi refugee after World War II that we got.
Some people think Hitler escaped and went to Argentina. Are you on the list?
The local people also believe that. Also,
wow.
There was a young girl who allegedly took care of Hitler in the Andes, and she was kind of a well-known figure, and she died like 7 years ago. And so we talked all about that.
What kind of crazy historical injustice would that be if Hitler actually got away? Like he didn't really die. I feel like that would be just so crazy. But that's amazing. What you're describing, I think a lot of people know, or at least a lot of people listening won't be able to go to Argentina per se. But what I'm getting from what you're saying is you got to put yourself out there from time to time in a situation that challenges you and gives you some adventure, gives you that ability to be a boy again, like you said, and live out some whimsy, some fun, step out of the day-to-day grind that can lead to burnout. And it's amazing.
I've got one more story, kind of the most epic part.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't want to cut that off.
Of the adventure. And that was the last place that we went to. And so the last place was really like a step back in time. It was this 25,000 acre ranch that you turn off on a dirt road and you're on the ranch, but it's another 9-10 miles to the actual house. You're in the middle of it. And they hunt Monterey style, which essentially you use dogs and men, and in some instances horses, to basically scour these woods and push the animal into a clearing. And as you're pushing the animal into the clearing, you're shooting at a moving target. And so I'm basically dropped in the middle of this ranch. I have my back to the woods. I've got a lawn chair and a 50-year-old 30-06 that I'm using. And they're like, all right, we're gonna get the dogs and we're gonna push these hogs, and you're gonna shoot at them moving, and so you're gonna want to lead them. And by the way, we have two to three puma that live in our ranch, and so if you see a puma, please shoot it. And so,
just an everyday conversation.
Yeah. So your brain's just thinking all the thoughts. And so wound up getting to see several hogs, shot several hogs, which are an invasive species down there.
Get a puma?
But I did not shoot a puma. But one of them, you're shooting at a moving target, which I never do in the States. It's always, a stable shot. They're being still. You're placing the perfect shot. And so,
you have to be a pretty good shooter for that.
I learned, but anyway, so one of them I shot in the rear end. And so we had to track this thing. And so the ranch owner is a character straight out of a movie. He's a 65-year-old man from Spain originally, a veterinarian, moved to Argentina and bought a ranch. And he wears corduroy, wears a golfer's hat, and carries a double-barrel shotgun around, just like a character out of a movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic, charismatic man. And so we start tracking these hogs, following a blood trail, trying to find this hog. And he has these two little terriers that are like terrier and hound mix that are running ahead of us, tracking this hog. And he gets ahead of me a little bit, and he's wearing green. And so I lose him.
Oh no.
And so this is a giant 25,000 acre ranch. And so he's ahead of me a little bit. And so I'm pausing and I'm listening. Okay, I hear him. All right, go that direction. So I keep going, and I would never found him again, but I'm listening. I'm listening for the dogs. I'm listening for him. And I'm just blindly running through this brush in this jungle. And then I hear a gunshot in front of me. And my heart stops. I'm like, okay, let's get there. Get closer. And so I take off running towards this gunshot. And then I hear another one. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm in the middle of these woods, 10 hours from Buenos Aires, and I need to leave for the airport in an hour and a half. Forget this. And so I turn around and blindly run back to where I thought we started. And that was nerve-wracking in and of itself. But I get to the clearing. I get back to where we were sitting, and shortly, 30 minutes later, another truck pulls up, and that man, Carlos, gets out. And his face is covered in scratches and dirt
Whoa.
And black. And he steps out, and his shotgun is in two pieces. And I'm like, Carlos, what happened? and he, in his broken English, he's like, I ran into the hog and I shot it in the rear, and it took off running. And so I started chasing the hog through the woods, and I trapped it between some trees, and it faced me, and I shot it again, and it took off towards me, and it knocked me over and was attacking me. And so I grabbed my gun and I was out of bullets. And so I hit the hog with my gun and I broke my shotgun. And
That's a real man right there.
and my jaw dropped. I was like, this guy is 65 years old. He just lost me in the woods. And he, tracks and finds this wounded hog and
beating it to death.
And
did he kill it?
He killed it. The gunshots killed it. It just
took a while.
Yeah. Anyway, what an adventure!
Yeah, for real.
What an adventure! And so you asked me what do I take from that? What does the listener do with that besides from hearing me talk like an idiot?
Well, go risk your life in Argentina is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
If you want renewal, go risk your life in Argentina.
Your words, not mine. I would say travel is life-giving.
Yeah.
Getting to meet people from different cultures, share food, share stories, learn, that is life-giving.
Yeah.
Doing things that are difficult, that scare you a little bit, is also life-giving. It's getting out of your comfort zone, learning something, having a story worth sharing.
Yeah.
Having something to come home and tell my boys about is worth doing. And all of that it gets you out of the office, lets you, the flights here and there let you think bigger. You see other cultures, you see how big the world is, and you can think a little bit bigger. Your problems seem a little bit smaller and a little bit easier to address. And all of that is just doing something fun.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be as extravagant as a trip to Argentina. I think a lot of it is just about getting out and doing something that's unique and different from your day to day so that it stands out. And I think what you also mentioned about it being fun, but challenging, pushing you a little bit, adding all of those elements in together. I think that's why travel is often what checks that box, because it puts you in a new environment, and being in a new environment just by itself is already a unique thing for you. And so for people listening, it doesn't have to be something big. It can be something, it can be a weekend trip to Caprock Canyon if you've never done that before. Maybe you do that with your kids, or you go for a hike, drive out to, Carlsbad Caverns or something. Just being able to check out of the day-to-day and find some adventure, find some whimsy, can go a long way to preventing burnout, like we're starting out talking about in this podcast, and taking the time to be deliberate with those things, whether it's working out, going on a bigger trip, or just having a game night with the family, making sure that you identify when you're headed towards burnout, making sure that you know what your tells are so that you can pick up on them, maybe have some accountability, whether it's from your spouse or a close friend, but having people in your corner that can also help you recognize if you're headed in the wrong direction, and then doing the things that bring you back to life.
Yeah.
And make you show up for life as your best self, because that's when you're going to thrive. That's when your work is going to be excellent. That's when you're going to be proudest of the person you are in every aspect of your life.
Great summary. That was very well said. And I think all of this, we are business owners. We are entrepreneurs because we want to build the life that we want. Yeah. And so much of this, if you can do all of those things, I don't want to retire.
Yeah.
I want to keep doing this and building my business around my life that is sustainable and life-giving, and I'm on fire for it. I'm passionate about it. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
That's like, it takes this intentionality that you were just describing. But if you do that well, you don't need a vacation from your life. Your life is that.
Yeah. Why would you want to retire? If you're living with that balance, life is enjoyable, and you're not looking for some big finish line so you can just sit around in your easy chair.
Exactly.
You want to keep this going, but to find the balance, to calibrate things so that you're not getting crushed by the day to day, but still showing up and being productive in a way that's energizing. Yeah, it's a hard balance to strike, but hopefully today we've talked about some strategies and some tools that can help some people out there, and some things that we can continue to work on together and try to practice.
I completely agree. And I think this episode just, you can't overstate how important that is to take account for how you're feeling emotionally, spiritually,
Yes,
physically, and be proactive to take care of that for you, your business, your family, and your community. And that's important.
Yeah. The last thing, maybe we can end here, that we didn't talk about enough, I think, is that spiritual part.
Absolutely.
And, for me, that's daily prayer, and that's trying to get into the word as much as possible. Sometimes one of the challenges that I just have to take on is something is leading in my church family. Maybe it's teaching a kid's Bible class, or just volunteering with a outreach ministry to feed people in our community. But doing those things, having a mindset of serving others I think, not just often, is always renewing. When you turn the focus away from me and my self-care, and like, those things are good, but ultimately service to others, self-sacrifice is what gives us meaning and purpose, and gives us a renewal. And, as followers of Jesus, that's something that I know we agree on. But I think that is probably the most powerful way that we can find renewal and avoid burnout, is just flipping that mindset from serving self to serving others.
Yeah, we alluded to it earlier explicitly, that you can either worry or you can trust God.
Yeah.
And if you're worrying, you need to take account of, where's your heart? Why are you worrying? What are you making an idol? Why are you not relying on the Father? And to take account there, that's where you have to start.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought us back here. You need to start. And so many of the other things, the self-care, the blah, 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 is so that you can show up as your best self to serve other people.
Right.
And, we go through seasons of life where, serving people, there is that altruistic piece of that is fulfilling. But there's also, you're emptying of yourself. And so sometimes you need to be poured into.
Yeah.
And so before you can pour out into others, you have to make sure your cup is filled, so that you can show up as your best self and serve them to the best of your abilities. Yeah. And great to bring that full circle. And it starts with, your spiritual side.
It's good stuff.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. That was a fun conversations. Thanks for letting me tell my most recent story. And I hope the listener got a lot out of that. If you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and click subscribe and keep coming back, because there's a lot more where that came from. And we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the next one.